Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about something that I think we can all relate to, and that is overthinking, especially in sales. I think it can be a real challenge.
Oh, yeah. It's a huge problem for sure.
And, you start to second guess yourself maybe after a sales call.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, oh, did I say the right thing? Should I have said that? And it can really kind of impact your performance and your mental well-being as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So to help us unpack this a little bit better and give us some practical advice today, we're going to be diving deep into some advice given by the sales experts.
hmm
Now, they're a global sales recruitment company, so they really understand the pressures of sales.
hmm
And what I thought was really interesting about their advice is that they don't just say, stop overthinking.
Right.
Because how do you even do that, right?
Yeah.
It's like telling someone to just calm down when they're already stressed. Doesn't really work.
Yeah. It's kind of like saying, don't think about a pink elephant.
Exactly.
And then all you can think about is a pink elephant, right?
It's the first thing that pops into your head. So their approach is a lot more practical and I think a lot more helpful.
Yeah.
So their first point is all about recognizing the overthinking cycle.
Mm.
So it's about becoming aware of those moments when those negative thought patterns start to, kind of take over, I guess.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You start to maybe replay things over and over in your head, like I said, like a sales call or maybe a presentation you gave.
Yeah.
Or you're constantly worrying about, what if this happens? What if they say no?
Yeah. It's so easy to go down that rabbit hole, isn't it? To get caught up in all those what ifs and the
Yeah.
anxieties.
Do you find yourself ever doing that?
Oh, absolutely. Especially, I think, early on in my career, I used to overthink everything. Every interaction, every email I sent, every presentation I gave. It was exhausting.
Yeah, it's so draining.
It is. And it's actually really counterproductive.
Yeah.
Because you end up spending all this time and energy worrying instead of actually taking action.
It's almost like you're frozen, right?
Exactly. And you end up in this analysis paralysis. You're overanalyzing every little detail, and it prevents you from moving forward.
Yeah. So how did you, I guess, learn to manage that a bit better?
Well, I think for me, what really helped was that first step that the sales experts talk about, that self-awareness piece. Actually taking the time to kind of step back and observe those thought patterns. And they even recommend keeping a little journal or a log for a few days, just to kind of jot down those moments when you feel that overthinking taking hold.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's a really simple exercise, but it can be sad powerful because it helps you to really pinpoint those patterns. You start to understand what situations or what triggers tend to send you down that overthinking spiral. Like, is it after a certain type of meeting, or is it when you're feeling under pressure?
So you can start to kind of anticipate it maybe a little bit more.
Exactly. And then you can start to put strategies in place to manage those situations more effectively.
So, kind of catching yourself in the moment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like shining a spotlight on those mental gremlins, right? Bringing them out of the shadows so you can actually deal with them.
Yeah, and that leads nicely into the next point, which is challenging those negative thoughts, which I think can be hard because especially I think in sales, there's so much, rejection that you kind of face on a daily basis
Yeah.
that it can be hard not to take it personally.
It really can. And I think it's natural to kind of gravitate towards those negative thoughts, especially when things aren't going your way. But I think the key here is to remember that our thoughts are not always facts.
Right.
Just because we think something doesn't necessarily make it true.
Like we're catastrophizing everything.
Exactly. And we're often our own worst critics, right?
Yeah.
So I think the key here is to learn how to challenge those negative thoughts, to question them, to ask ourselves, is this really true? Or am I just letting my imagination run wild here? And I think that's where a lot of the practical advice from the sales experts comes in. They have a lot of great tips for how to actually reframe those negative thoughts into something more positive and more action-oriented.
So it's not about suppressing those thoughts altogether.
So it's not about suppressing those thoughts altogether.
Yeah, not at all. It's more about acknowledging them and then choosing to focus on something more helpful, something that's going to move us forward.
So it's almost like you're replacing those negative thoughts with something that is going to serve you better, I guess.
Exactly. So, for example, instead of thinking, I completely bombed that presentation, I'm never going to close this deal, you could try reframing it as, okay, maybe that presentation didn't go as perfectly as I'd hoped. What can I learn from this experience? What specific adjustments can I make for next time?
So kind of learning from that experience and not letting it define you.
Exactly. And it's about shifting your focus from dwelling on the problem to finding solutions and taking action.
So it's like a more proactive approach rather than being reactive, I guess. Absolutely. And I think this ties in really nicely with their next piece of advice, which is all about the importance of mindfulness. Now, I know mindfulness can sound a little bit woo-woo to some people.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But really, all it means is training your mind to stay present and focused.
Yeah, and not getting too caught up in, like you said, the past or, worrying about the future.
Exactly. And it can be so helpful in a high-pressure environment like sales where there's always so much going on and it's easy to get swept up in the chaos.
Yeah.
But when you can practice mindfulness, you can learn to kind of create that space between your thoughts and your reactions. So you can respond to situations more calmly and more effectively.
So rather than just reacting impulsively, you can kind of take a step back and kind of think things through.
Exactly. And one of the things I love about the sales experts is that they provide really specific techniques that sales professionals can actually use to incorporate mindfulness into their daily routines.
Okay, so not just be mindful.
Right.
They give you actual actions to take.
Exactly. And they're really simple things, too. Like, for example, taking a few deep breaths before a big call, just to calm your nerves, get yourself centered, or visualizing a successful outcome before a presentation, just to boost your confidence. These are really simple, but they can be incredibly effective tools.
Yeah. And it doesn't sound too overwhelming for people who are already busy as well. They can just incorporate it into their day.
Absolutely. It's about finding those little moments throughout your day where you can just pause, take a breath, and reset.
I like that. So mindfulness, it sounds like it can help you manage stress better.
Absolutely. And it can also help you to make clearer decisions because you're not so clouded by all that mental chatter.
Right. And I guess being more present as well.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another really important point that the sales experts highlight, which is the importance of having clear goals. Now, we hear a lot about goal setting, right?
We do.
But I think it's especially important in sales because when you don't have a clear sense of direction, it's so easy to get lost in the weeds. You start second-guessing yourself, you're not sure what to prioritize, and you can end up feeling really overwhelmed and paralyzed by indecision.
Yeah, and that feeds into the overthinking as well.
Exactly. And that's where the concept of SMART goals comes in. The sales experts really emphasize that your goals need to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
Right. So not just, I want to close more deals.
Exactly. You need to be really specific. How many more deals? By when? What specific actions are you going to take to achieve that goal?
And breaking it down.
Yeah, breaking it down into smaller, more manageable steps.
So you have that kind of roadmap, right?
Exactly. And then it's just a matter of focusing on one step at a time.
And not getting too overwhelmed by the big picture.
Right. And I think the beauty of having SMART goals is that it gives you a sense of progress. You can actually see yourself moving towards something.
And it probably boosts motivation as well.
Absolutely. And when you're feeling motivated and you can see that you're making progress, it's a lot easier to stay focused and avoid getting sidetracked by those overthinking spirals.
Okay, so we've talked about recognizing those overthinking patterns, challenging those negative thoughts, embracing mindfulness, and setting those SMART goals. But what happens when things don't go according to plan? What happens when, despite our best efforts, we face setbacks or even failures? I mean, it's sales. It's going to happen.
Oh, absolutely. It's part of the game. And I think this is where the sales experts offer some of their wisest advice. They actually encourage us to embrace failure.
Really?
Yeah. They say to look at it as a learning opportunity.
So not being afraid to fail.
Exactly. Because everyone fails. Everyone makes mistakes.
Even the top salespeople.
Even the top salespeople, right. And the key is not to let those failures define you. It's about how you respond to those setbacks. Can you analyze what went wrong? Can you extract valuable lessons from the experience? And then can you use those lessons to improve your approach next time?
So viewing it as a positive, like you said, a learning experience.
Exactly. And I think that's what really separates the good salespeople from the great ones. It's that ability to bounce back, to learn from their mistakes, and to keep moving forward.
So it's all about that growth mindset, right?
Absolutely.
And speaking of support, that leads into the sales expert's final piece of advice, which is to build a strong support system. I mean, I think anyone in sales, it can be a really tough gig sometimes.
It really can be. There's so many ups and downs. There's rejection, there's pressure to perform. It can be really demanding. And that's why it's so important to have that support network in place. People that you can turn to for advice, for encouragement, for just a listening ear.
Yeah, like a team of cheerleaders almost.
Yeah, exactly. People who understand what you're going through and who can offer that support and perspective when you need it most.
And it doesn't have to be a formal mentor necessarily, right? It could just be a colleague or a friend.
Yeah, absolutely. It could be anyone who you trust and who you feel comfortable opening up to.
And I guess there's a lot of different online communities as well these days.
Yeah, for sure. There are so many great online communities for sales professionals where you can connect with people from all over the world, share experiences, get advice, and just feel like you're part of something bigger.
Yeah. It's like having a tribe almost.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that sense of belonging and connection can be so valuable, especially in a field like sales where it's easy to feel isolated.
So it's not just about, mastering the techniques. It's about developing that support network.
Absolutely. It's about taking care of your mental well-being and creating a supportive environment where you can thrive.
So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue this conversation. We'll talk about how to actually put these insights into practice.
Sounds great. It's like having that extra layer of support, That can make all the difference.
It really can. And so, thinking about all of this advice from the sales experts, it sounds like they're really advocating for this more holistic approach to sales success, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it.
It's not just about closing those deals and, hitting your numbers. It's also about, creating a mindset and, having those strategies to manage the stress and the challenges that come with the sales world.
Yeah, for sure. I think, for a long time, sales was all about those hard closing techniques.
Right.
And just, pushing for that sale no matter what.
Yeah.
But now it's becoming so much more about building those relationships.
Right.
And understanding the customer's needs.
Yeah.
And being able to really connect with them on a deeper level.
Right.
And I think that requires a different kind of skill set.
It does.
It's not just about, being able to talk the talk.
Yeah.
You also have to be able to walk the walk.
Yeah. It's a lot more about emotional intelligence now, I think, as well.
Absolutely.
Being able to understand yourself and manage your own emotions. And then being able to understand your client's emotions as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that ties into everything that the sales experts are talking about here.
Yeah. And I think it's great that they're really highlighting these, softer skills, I guess you could call them, because they're so important. I mean, in the past, they might have been seen as, a nice to have.
Right.
But now they're absolutely essential.
They are. So, thinking about this advice from the sales experts, what I'd love to do now is kind of shift gears a little bit and think about how these insights can actually be applied in a more practical sense.
Okay. Yeah.
So imagine that you are a sales leader who's listening to this right now, and you want to address overthinking within your own team. What are some of the things that you could actually start doing?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's about creating that safe space for those conversations.
Right.
So often these things are just brushed under the rug. People are afraid to talk about them because they think it makes them look weak or unprofessional.
Right. Yeah. Like you have to have it all together all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just not realistic. So I think, sales leaders need to normalize talking about these things, to make it clear that it's okay to struggle, that it's okay to ask for help.
Right.
And to create an environment where team members feel comfortable sharing their challenges without fear of judgment.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why people overthink so much is because they are afraid. They're afraid of failing.
Yeah.
They're afraid of letting the team down. They're afraid of being judged, like you said.
Yeah. So I think it's so important to create that culture of psychological safety where people feel like they can be vulnerable and they can be authentic.
Right. And I think once you've got that foundation in place, then you can start to introduce some of these techniques that we've talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you could dedicate a team meeting to discussing mindfulness, or you could bring in a guest speaker who specializes in performance psychology. You could start a book club.
Oh, I like that idea.
Yeah. There are so many great resources out there, and it doesn't have to be anything too complicated or time-consuming.
Right.
Just little things here and there can make a big difference.
Yeah, and I think, having that support network is really important. Like we talked about before, so maybe creating some mentorship programs within the team.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Where, the more experienced salespeople can kind of share their experiences and maybe some of the things that they've learned along the way.
Yeah, I think that's so valuable because, when you're starting out in sales, it can feel really overwhelming.
Yeah.
And it's so helpful to have someone who's been there before who can offer that guidance and support.
Right. And, even just having that person to talk to
Yeah.
who understands what you're going through.
Exactly. And I think that's what it all comes down to, is creating that sense of community, that feeling that you're not in this alone.
Right.
That you have people who are there to support you and to help you succeed.
Now, let's say you're a hiring manager and you're looking to build a team of, resilient, high-performing sales professionals.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you might look for in a candidate, considering all of this advice from the sales experts?
Well, of course you want someone who's got those core sales skills.
Right.
Someone with a proven track record,
Yeah.
someone who understands the market. But I think it goes beyond that. I think it's really important to assess their mindset.
Okay.
Do they have that growth mindset? Are they comfortable with failure?
Right.
Do they seem like someone who can bounce back from setbacks?
Right, yeah, because it's going to happen.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think you can get a sense of that through their answers to your questions, their body language, just their overall demeanor.
And you can even ask them, about a time that they failed and how they dealt with it, how they overcame it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you can kind of gauge, what their thought processes are.
Yeah. And I think, when you're hiring for sales roles, it's really important to think long term.
Right.
You don't just want someone who can close deals in the short term. You want someone who's going to be a valuable asset to your team for years to come.
Right. Someone who's going to grow with the company.
Exactly. So I think investing that time up front to really assess their mindset is well worth it.
Yeah, it's an investment. Now, let's say you're an executive.
Okay.
And you're looking to create a company culture that supports sales success. What are some of the initiatives or programs that you might think about implementing?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's about having a clear vision, a clear strategy for sales.
Right.
Everyone needs to be on the same page.
Right. From the top down.
Exactly. From the CEO to the newest sales rep.
Right.
Everyone needs to understand what the goals are,
Right.
what the expectations are, what the values are.
So it all aligns.
Exactly. And I think that creates a sense of purpose. People feel like they're part of something bigger.
Right. And that they're working towards something meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also important to invest in resources and training programs that support their development, not just in terms of their sales skills, but also in terms of their mindset.
Right. So it's going back to those softer skills again.
Exactly. So, think about workshops on mindfulness, on resilience, things that can help them to manage stress, to overcome challenges.
To build their resilience. And I guess coaching programs as well could be really helpful.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think everyone benefits from coaching. It gives you that one-on-one support.
Yeah.
It helps you to identify your blind spots.
Right.
And it helps you to develop a plan to achieve your goals.
So there's that accountability there as well.
Exactly. And, don't forget about celebrating successes. I think that's so important.
It is. And recognizing people's efforts as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Acknowledge people's hard work. Reward them for their achievements. I think that creates a really positive and motivating work environment.
Yeah, where people feel appreciated.
Exactly. And I think, when people feel appreciated and supported, they're more likely to be engaged. They're more likely to go the extra mile.
Right. And ultimately, I guess, more likely to succeed.
Exactly.
So it all kind of ties together.
It really does.
It's about creating that company culture that supports success on all levels.
Yeah. And I think, when you invest in your sales team's well-being, you're ultimately investing in the success of your company.
Exactly. It really is about taking a more holistic approach. It's not just about the sales techniques. It's about everything else that goes along with it.
Yeah. It's like we were saying before, it's about the mindset, the resilience, the support system.
Yeah. So before we wrap up today, I'd love to kind of distill everything that we've talked about into some key takeaways. So for our listeners out there, what are some of the actionable steps that they can start taking today to combat overthinking and really boost their sales success?
Okay. Well, I think first things first, you got to recognize those overthinking patterns.
Yeah.
Start paying attention to when those negative thoughts start creeping in, when they're starting to drain your energy.
Yeah, when you feel yourself kind of spiraling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And notice what triggers those thought patterns. Is it after a tough call? Is it before a big presentation?
Yeah, you can start to kind of see the patterns.
Yeah, exactly. And once you know what your triggers are, you can start to manage those situations more effectively.
Yeah. So once you've identified those patterns, then what?
Then it's all about challenging those negative thoughts.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, are these thoughts really as valid as they seem? Or am I just catastrophizing, Can you reframe those thoughts in a more positive, more action-oriented way?
So like instead of dwelling on a deal that you lost, maybe think about, what can I learn from this? Or how can I improve for next time?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about shifting your focus from dwelling on the problem to finding solutions.
And don't forget about mindfulness.
Yes. Mindfulness is so important.
It can really make a difference.
It really can.
Yeah.
Even just taking a few minutes each day to practice mindfulness can help you to manage stress better, to stay more focused, and to make clearer decisions.
Yeah. And the sales experts gave us some great little tips on how to incorporate mindfulness into our day. Like taking those deep breaths.
Yeah, those deep breaths are so helpful. Or visualizing a successful outcome.
Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah.
It's like you're setting yourself up for success.
Exactly.
And then, of course, there's setting those clear goals.
Yes.
Like we talked about before.
SMART goals.
SMART goals. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound.
Yes.
I love that.
Write them down. Make a plan. And then just focus on taking action.
Yeah, one step at a time.
Exactly.
And even with the best planning and preparation in the world, there are going to be times when we face setbacks, when we fail.
Yes, that's inevitable.
Yeah, but it's about how we deal with those setbacks that really matters.
Absolutely. And that's where that growth mindset comes in. It's about looking at those failures as learning opportunities.
Right.
Extracting those valuable lessons, and then using them to improve our approach next time.
So it's not the end of the world.
Not at all. It's just a stepping stone.
Yeah, and I think the final takeaway for me is the importance of building that support system.
Absolutely.
Having those people around you who you can turn to when you need advice, encouragement, or just a listening ear.
Yeah. Surround yourself with people who believe in you, who support you, and who challenge you to be your best.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, sales is a team sport.
It is.
And we need those people in our corner.
We do.
So if you're listening to this and you're feeling overwhelmed, remember that you're not alone. There are people who care about you, who want to see you succeed.
Yes.
And there are resources available to help you.
Reach out. Ask for help.
Yeah.
And keep moving forward.
I love that. Great advice. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found this conversation helpful and insightful.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive into the world of sales.